While the sting of my father's belt was still fresh on my skin, my first instinct wasn't tears. It was business. I logged on and made one final transaction, transferring my 18 years of back pay from our joint account to mine. They thought violence was the answer. I knew it was just the starting gun. Hey everyone, it's Ava, and welcome to my space. The first thing I did after my father beat me for refusing to iron my brother's football jersey was not to cry. It was to walk calmly to my room, open my laptop, and drain the joint savings account I shared with my mother. Every single penny. To be clear, it wasn't theft. It was severance pay for 18 years of unpaid labor. They thought the violence, the sheer force of his anger, would finally break me and put me back in my place. They had no idea it was the trigger for an exit strategy I had been building in silence for years. You see, we were the perfect Austen family. My father, Greg, was the charismatic CEO of a tech startup. My mother, Brenda, ran a popular blog called Austen Perfect, where she waxed poetic about family values and organic meals. And my brother, Liam, was the golden boy, the star quarterback destined for a Division I scholarship. I was the ghost in the machine, the one who debugged my father's code late at night, ghost wrote my mother's blog posts, and ran the household with the precision of a project manager, so Liam's only focus was football. I was the invisible engineer of their perfect lives. That moment, when something inside you just snaps and you know you're done, it's a terrifying but powerful feeling. If you've ever had a moment where you knew you were ready to take your power back, no matter the cost, just let me know you're here by commenting with the city you're watching from right now. Let's see where all this quiet strength is coming from. Wow. Austin, London, Manila, Toronto. It's incredible how many of us are connected in this feeling. Thank you for sharing. To understand that severance pay, you have to understand what they took from me first. It wasn't just my time. It was my future. The spring of my senior year, I had accomplished the impossible. I had earned a full-ride scholarship to the computer science program at UT Austin, a golden ticket, my one-way pass out of that house, earned with thousands of hours of coding and studying when everyone else was asleep. I was ecstatic. Then, 2 weeks before graduation, my brother Liam was arrested for a DUI after a high school party. The scandal threatened everything: his football scholarship, my parents' perfect reputation, the entire Austen Perfect brand. That night, my parents sat me down in the living room. There were no congratulations for my achievement. There was only a cold, calculated request. They asked me to defer my admission for 1 year and use a portion of the money I had saved from freelance coding jobs, money meant for my dorm and living expenses, to pay for Liam's high-powered legal team. "It's just a gap year, Ava," my father said, his voice smooth as silk. "We'll pay you back double. You're the responsible one. You're the only one who can fix this for the family." So, the golden boy's future was saved by the invisible girl's sacrifice. It's a story as old as time, really. I'm curious what you all think. In your own families or circles, which role did you see more often? Type savior, if you were always the one fixing things, or type star, if you knew someone who was always the one being saved. Let's see the balance in our community. It's fascinating seeing the mix of savior and star in the comments. I was definitely the savior. For the next 12 months, I lived out my role as the family fixer. I put my dream on a shelf and became their full-time, unpaid COO. I worked remotely for my dad's startup, debugging code and managing projects. I scheduled my mom's blog posts and handled her brand collaborations. I even managed Liam's complex training schedule and diet. I did it all, holding on to their promise like a prayer. Just 1 year, Ava. Then it's your turn. My turn was supposed to come after Liam officially signed with his dream college football team. The signing party was a lavish affair at our Austin home. Caterers, local press, the whole 9 yards. After the last guest left, I found my parents in the kitchen, basking in the glow of their success. I took a deep breath and asked, "Now that Liam's future is secure, can we talk about mine?" "You promised." My father didn't even look up from his phone. "We'll see, Ava. Things are tight." My mother added, "Don't ruin a perfect night by being selfish." Just then, Liam walked in, pulled off his grass-stained jersey, and tossed it at me. "Hey," he said, "I need this washed by morning." And for the first time in my life, a word I had never used with them formed on my lips. No. A dangerous silence fell over the room. My father slowly stood up, his face dark with a rage I knew all too well. He saw my refusal not as a boundary, but as a rebellion. And in our house, rebellion had only one consequence. The violence that followed my refusal is a story for a moment later, because to understand how I could walk away from it and not just survive, but thrive, you need to understand the weapon I had been building in silence during that entire long gap year. My family saw me as the emotional, dutiful daughter. They never once suspected I was also the meticulous accountant of their sins. While I was their unpaid coder, social media manager, and personal assistant, I was also keeping a secret. It wasn't a diary. It was an Excel spreadsheet I called the Ledger. It had 4 tabs. The first was Services Rendered, Greg's startup, where I logged every hour of coding and project management, calculated at a conservative freelance rate of $75 an hour. The second was Brand Management, Austin Perfect, detailing the market value of the social media work I did for my mother's blog. The third, Personal Logistics, Liam, quantified the hours spent on his schedule. The final tab was the most important, Loan and Damages. It tracked my forfeited scholarship money and savings, with interest, compounded monthly. I started it as an exercise to keep myself sane, to prove that my labor had tangible value. But it evolved into my escape plan. It was a cold, hard, undeniable record of the debt they owed me, not just emotionally, but financially. That spreadsheet became my secret anchor to reality. It was proof that my time, my skills, and my sacrifice had a real, tangible value, even if they refused to see it. If you've ever kept a record of something, a journal, a list, even just screenshots, to remind yourself that what you experienced was real, just type the word documented in the comments. It's our nod to the quiet power of keeping the receipts. Seeing so many of you type documented gives me chills. That's the first step to taking back your power. So, when the shouting in my house finally stopped, and the sharp sting on my back began to fade into a dull throb, my family expected me to go to my room and cry. They expected submission. What they got was the quiet, methodical execution of a plan I had been rehearsing in my head for months. I didn't pack a single piece of clothing. I didn't take any of the things they had bought me. I opened my laptop, the one I had paid for with my own freelance money. First, I executed the bank transfer, my severance pay. Next, I went through every digital tie that bound me to them. I scrubbed my code from my father's company servers, leaving behind only the standard open-source libraries. I deleted the custom social media templates I had built for my mother's blog. I removed myself from the family phone plan and wiped my backup data from their shared cloud storage. Within 15 minutes, every digital trace of my labor, my value, was gone from their world. I packed a single backpack, my laptop, a hard drive containing a copy of the ledger, my phone, and my wallet. As I walked down the stairs, they were in the living room, watching TV, assuming they had won. I didn't say a word. I just walked out the front door and didn't look back. I wasn't a daughter running away from home. I was an employee walking out after a final, unacceptable breach of contract, and I had the invoice to prove it. I spent the first week at my friend Chloe's apartment in a strange state of limbo, waiting for the inevitable explosion. I expected furious calls, threatening texts, maybe even my father showing up at the door, but there was nothing. Just absolute silence. For a moment, a familiar, painful thought crept in. Maybe they didn't even notice I was gone. The truth, as I would later piece together from mutual acquaintances, was far more satisfying. It wasn't silence on their end. It was pure, unadulterated chaos. The perfect family machine had lost its engineer, and the entire system was beginning to fail. The first casualty was my mother's blog. Without me to edit her posts and manage the site's backend, Austin Perfect became a mess of typos and broken links. Her follower engagement plummeted. Next was my father's startup. A critical bug appeared in their software just 2 days before a major investor presentation. He had no one for the late-night fix. He missed the deadline, a catastrophic failure in the fast-moving Austin tech world. And Liam, the golden boy quarterback, apparently showed up to practice with a football jersey that was still soaking wet because he couldn't figure out the dryer settings. He missed a crucial physical therapy appointment because no one had put it on his calendar. They hadn't just lost their maid. They had lost their coder, their publicist, their project manager, and their executive assistant. They had built a beautiful, high-performance car, but they had no idea how the engine worked. And now that the mechanic had walked off the job, they were stranded on the side of the highway for the whole world to see. After 3 weeks of watching their perfectly manicured world descend into chaos, my parents finally made their move. But it wasn't a phone call. It wasn't an apology. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope delivered by a courier to Chloe's apartment. It was a legal letter. They had hired a lawyer. The letter was an official cease and desist, accusing me of theft of proprietary assets and intellectual property. The asset in question, the laptop I had bought with my own money, the one I had used to build their digital lives. They demanded its immediate return, along with all the code I had written for my father's startup and the content strategy documents I had created for my mother's blog. The letter gave me 48 hours to comply before they would pursue formal legal action. I read it twice, then a third time. I felt a flash of fear. The word lawsuit is designed to intimidate. But then, a cold, hard clarity washed over me. This wasn't about a laptop. This was about control. This was their way of saying, you do not get to leave. You do not get to be free. We still own you. It was the most dishonest, manipulative, and yet predictable move they could have possibly made. It wasn't an olive branch. It was a declaration of war. It's a classic bully tactic, right? When they can't win with reason, they try to win with fear. They use their power and position to try and make you feel small again. I want to know if you've ever faced a moment like that. You don't have to share details, but if you've ever had to stand up to a bully, just type the word strong in the comments below. Let's fill this space with a little solidarity. The number of you typing strong in the comments right now is breathtaking. Thank you. That solidarity is exactly what I needed. Because fighting back doesn't always mean being the loudest one in the room. Sometimes it means being the most prepared. My parents had sent their lawyers after me, so I used a portion of my severance pay and hired my own. I found a sharp, hungry young lawyer who specialized in labor disputes. I walked into her office, handed her my laptop, and opened the single most important file I had ever created, the ledger. I watched her face as she scrolled through the tabs. The skepticism in her eyes slowly turned into a look of sheer, unadulterated respect. "This is incredible," she said. "This isn't a diary. This is a bill." So we didn't send back a letter of defense. We sent back an invoice. On official legal letterhead, my lawyer drafted a formal invoice to the Whitmore Family LLC, as we cheekily called it. Line item 1, 1,200 hours of software development and IT consulting for my father's startup. Line item 2, brand management and content creation for my mother's blog. Line item 3, logistics and personal assistance services for my brother. And the final, largest line item, breach of verbal contract and damages, for the full value of my forfeited university scholarship, plus interest. The grand total was just over $180,000. We sent it via certified mail the next day. I wasn't just defending myself against their threats anymore. I was formally, legally, and professionally demanding payment for my worth. After my lawyer sent that invoice, the threatening letters stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, stunned. My invoice wasn't just a demand for money, it was a mirror. And for the first time, they were forced to look at the ugly truth of what their perfect life actually cost. And without me there to patch the cracks, their entire world began to implode. The first to fall was my father's startup. The buggy software I used to fix was now crashing during investor demos. The meticulous project timelines I used to manage were now a chaotic mess. Rumors began to swirl in the tight-knit Austin tech scene about instability at his company. His reputation, the one thing he valued more than anything, was taking a direct hit. My mother's Austin Perfect blog met a quicker, more public end. Without my management, her content grew sloppy. Then, an anonymous local gossip account posted a blind item about a beloved Austin momfluencer whose perfect family life is a complete sham. The comments section was brutal. Her brand, built on a lie, was destroyed by a whisper of the truth. Liam, away at college, was completely adrift without his lifelong support system. He struggled with his classes, missed training sessions, and was reportedly benched for the first 2 games of the season. The Golden Boy was tarnishing. I didn't have to do anything. I just stayed away and watched as the empire they built on my back collapsed under its own weight. It's a hard lesson, but one that's undeniably true. The foundations we build our lives on matter. If you believe that people ultimately create their own downfall, comment with the word karma below. It's a quiet acknowledgement that the universe has its own way of balancing the books. Seeing all those karma comments is a powerful thing. It seems we share a belief in cause and effect. After a few months of watching their world crumble from a safe distance, I honestly thought I'd never hear from them again. I had my new life, my nursing classes, my peace. I assumed the story was over. Then one evening there was a knock on my door. It was my mother. I almost didn't recognize her. The polished Austin perfect influencer was gone. In her place was a tired-looking woman with stress lines around her eyes and desperation clinging to her like cheap perfume. She didn't threaten or demand. This time, she tried a new tactic, a performance of remorse. "Ava," she said, her voice soft and rehearsed. "We were wrong. We didn't see your value, and we are so sorry." She spoke of rebuilding, of second chances, and then came the real reason for her visit. My father's startup was on the brink of collapse. A rival company was planning a hostile takeover, and unless they could stabilize their software and secure their next round of funding, they would lose everything. "We want to make it right," she said, leaning forward with a hopeful glint in her eye. "Your father wants to offer you a real position, a senior developer role, a six-figure salary, even a seat on the board. We can be partners. We can rebuild this. As a family." I just looked at her. It was the most tempting offer she could possibly make, framed as the very thing I had always wanted. Their respect. But I saw it for what it was. It wasn't an apology. It was a desperate business proposal. They didn't want their daughter back. They needed to rehire their best engineer. I let my mother finish her desperate last-ditch proposal to make me a partner in their sinking ship. I saw the flicker of hope in her eyes, the belief that she could still manipulate me with the promise of a title and a salary. When she was done, I looked at her, not with anger, but with a kind of detached pity. "Brenda," I said, using her first name for the first time in my life, "you're not offering me a place in the family. You're trying to hire an emergency contractor. My answer is no." Her face fell. But I wasn't finished. "However," I continued, "I am willing to make you a final offer. A severance package, if you will." I laid it out, just as my lawyer and I had planned. I would agree to drop my legal claim for the $180,000 invoice and sign a non-disclosure agreement, giving them the silence they so desperately needed to salvage what was left of their reputation. In exchange, they would sign over the deed to the small investment condo they owned on the south side of town, a property whose value was less than what they owed me, but it was a clean, tangible asset. It was a take-it-or-leave-it deal. They could keep their pride and face total financial ruin, or they could swallow it and survive. They took the deal. We met one last time at a lawyer's office a week later. No apologies were exchanged, no final goodbyes. We just signed the papers in cold silence. I walked out of that office not as their daughter, but as a creditor who had finally collected on a long overdue debt. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel sadness. I just felt settled. The books were finally balanced. I never spent a single night in that condo. To me, it wasn't a home. It was capital. It was the seed of a future I was now free to build on my own terms. I sold the property, and with the funds in hand, I did the one thing I had sacrificed a year earlier. I enrolled in the computer science program at UT Austin. I paid my own way, and it felt like the greatest luxury in the world. After I graduated, I didn't go work for a big tech company. I started my own. It's a small startup that creates software to help freelancers and independent contractors meticulously track their hours and generate professional invoices, ensuring they get paid for every ounce of their value. In a way, I just built a better, more powerful version of the ledger for everyone else who refuses to work for free. My story isn't about getting revenge. It's about getting paid. It's about understanding that your time, your skills, and your emotional labor all have value. You are not required to be a silent, unpaid intern in your own life. You have the right to know your worth, to document it, and to demand that it be respected. True freedom isn't just walking away from a toxic situation. It's walking away with the equity you have rightfully earned. If you believe in building your own equity, in being the CEO of your own life, then hit that subscribe button and join this community. Let's remind each other that we are all worth the investment. Thank you for being here with me tonight.